Hey, my name is Steven. I'm a type designer. Normally I build fonts, but recently I built a guitar. And this is a very special guitar to me, partly because I built it and it took a lot of time and effort. And it's not totally done. As you can see, it's all taped together because I didn't order screws in time before I had to leave. I built it back at my parents' home in South Dakota, where there's like a garage and things, which I unfortunately don't have here in New York. I wanted to record a video about how I got this shape to work because it's a bit of a process. And to be honest, if I try to do this again in a year or two, I'm going to forget all the steps. And, maybe you will find this interesting as well. If you're, I don't know, on a similar process or want to do something similar. So, here's a render of the guitar before it was 3D cut out of wood. And then here's kind of how it ended up. So I'll go kind of to the beginning. I really like the two guitar styles, a Telecaster from Fender, really classic guitar shape out of the 50s, one of the first smash hit electric guitar shapes. And then also I really love the Les Paul, another kind of thing that originated in the 50s and is a total classic. So an interesting thing is that this program Glyphs is normally used to draw fonts, but in making fonts, you end up often drawing, say, a light style and a bold style. And as long as you have the same number of control points in those curves in all of the letter forms, you can interpolate a middle point or several mini middle points. So let me show this actually in a better way. Here I have in this app called Glyphs, a Les Paul master and a Tele master, as they're called, source drawings. And then there can be as many as you want in between. And I've set up a variable axis called poly to interpolate these things. And so this one is 50%. I can also make something that's 75%. Oops. And let's do one more at 25%, just to kind of show the rough basics here. And there's a lot more information online about drawing in Glyphs, so I'm not going to detail all of it here. But let me see if I can organize these slightly better. I'm going to call this 25 and this 75, and let's see if that does anything. These names are like flipped, I guess, aren't they? That's kind of funny. Oh, well, that probably doesn't matter. So annoying. Maybe I should call this 0 and this 100. That seems to work better. And by the way, I traced these from photos I found online, so they may not be 100% perfect. And I also made sure to draw them with points that would be point compatible. So there's exactly as many green points, as many off-curve points. And then I tried to keep the kind of end of the neck and the humbuckers and bridge in close proximity. And then I scaled these drawings once I had them to the actual sort of scale that these guitars would be. So for instance, I made the UPM, units per M, 5,000, and kind of thought of it as like each millimeter would be 10 units in the UPM, because these guitars in real life are about 42 centimeters long, 420 millimeters long. And so, yeah, that kind of allowed me to do a bit of math and figure out the approximate middle point. And so here I have the middle point of these two drawings. And I mean, right off the bat, I think it looks pretty awesome. But like, you know, it has a few issues. Primarily, actually, the main thing that bugs me is this thing up here it looks a little bit rough. It just doesn't look very smooth. So I did generate a new glyphs font from this. I think it's just something like generate instances. And then let me see, here I have it. And so this is just that shape, but slightly refined. And I forget if there was a step in between here or something. I think at one point I fixed these drawings a little more so they would interpolate more smoothly and such. Yeah, so for instance, let me just show you how this sort of thing can work. If I click and drag out, that already made it smoother. So it changes the shape a little bit. But yeah, you can kind of do things of that nature here. So I don't know. Anyhow, I'm trying not to make this a type tutorial. This is how I made the basic shape. And I tweaked it and refined it to make it just ever so slightly smoother curves and such. So for instance, I really focused on trying to make sure this looked smooth and round, and actually also I would like rotate it by 45 degrees, because very weirdly, a shape will look round or kind of rectangular in a different way if you rotate it by 45 degrees. So here it looks a little bit pointy at the bottom maybe, and a little bit flat on the diagonals. But then as soon as you rotate it by 45 degrees, to me at least, it looks kind of more rectangular, like a little pointy here and a little flat here. So I don't know. It's hard to find a perfect shape. But in any event, I could copy this. All right, I don't want the lasso tool. I could copy this and just like straight up Command C, and I pasted it into Illustrator. I did have versions where I, for instance, like put every little screw hole in here and stuff, like tried to measure that out, and the pickups and all of that. And actually, you know, you can kind of see that in this design. I've got more of these screw holes and stuff. Ultimately, I realized that that's not actually very practical to cut all that stuff on a CNC router, because at least in the approach I took, I really had to be careful I basically had to do some hand routing, at minimum to round over the edges, but also to like route accurate pickup holes along where the neck ended up aligning to once I actually drilled the holes for it and stuff. Probably something worth noting, this is a Telecaster neck pocket, but it is very specifically sized to the Telecaster neck I got from Warmouth Guitar Parts, which is a cool company that makes super nice guitar necks and bodies and things. I ordered the neck outright because that felt like just too much. I just didn't want to, that's an intimidating project, making a good neck. So I wanted to leave that to somebody who is actually a professional. And you can kind of see this is the control cavity design. The design I actually cut out was simple. It was just kind of a pill shape. And this would be kind of a version 2. So like because I'm putting the instrument cable jack right on this metal cover, this is a custom metal cover. It's not a standard Telecaster cover. If I was to make a second version, I would probably bump out the wood like this, because the jack will fit in there, and then you could have 2 screw holes on either side of the jack to really make sure it's sturdy with no issues. I don't think there will be issues. I haven't really gotten to test that just yet, but this would be certainly more sturdy. So something you can do actually, which is pretty cool, I'm about to get into like how to get from Illustrator to Fusion360. I generated these models in Autodesk Fusion360. Now, first of all, I ended up spending a lot of time figuring out Fusion360. And then in the end, I could not get a file to export from Fusion360 to the person who was helping me with the actual CNC routing. He's like a custom ski builder in the Black Hills of South Dakota, really neat guy. His company is called Full Send Skis. He makes beautiful skis. But he operates a CNC router from a PC. And for whatever reason, in any file format I try to export from Fusion 360, I even paid for a month subscription so I could have all of the export options. It just wouldn't load as anything dimensional in his end on his software. So hilariously, I spent many hours working to figure out 360. And in the end, I just exported like SVGs for Doug to like quickly like make dimensional in the software that would work directly on his CNC machine. So I assume there's a lot of useful stuff you could do for guitar building with Fusion 360. If I ever have a CNC router, I'd love to figure out kind of a workflow from Fusion into my router or whatever. Anyway, in case I do that, I did learn a few things that I want to kind of record here so I remember for later. So the simple way to get a drawing from Illustrator into Fusion 360 is that you can do this insert thing and, oh, here, you can insert an SVG. I was doing that for quite a few iterations of this, but I just realized a much better way. Because when you insert an SVG, then you have the problem of scaling it, and pretty much everything is a pain in Fusion 360, at least for a new user. Scaling is one of them. So there's a better way. Just have a single artboard with your drawing in Illustrator, and that should include the main body plus anything you want to route out of it in your model. So this could also have pickup cavities and stuff. As I mentioned, maybe not the most useful thing in the actual CNC routing. Other things I've done here is, of course, I've measured to make sure this is exactly the dimensions. This is exactly halfway, I think, between the dimensions of the Telecaster and the Les Paul. 329 and a little bit by 420 and a little bit millimeters. And then Shift O to select this artboard. And I position the artboard at 0x, 0y. I think that's probably helpful for Fusion 360. So then if we go to the menu, we can say export as, and messy files. I'm going to save this as prep, and then you've got various options here. Real DWG seems to work pretty well in my test just now. I'll give it a prep 3. Those options may be useful. They looked good when I read through them the first time, so I will consider them good. All right, so then in Fusion 360, this is where we're going basically, but open a design, open from my computer, please. This is the file we just exported, and it takes a minute to open it up. I wonder if it actually goes to like a server in the cloud. I'm still on the subscription as of this moment. I don't intend to stay on it because it's very expensive for somebody who doesn't ever use this stuff. But yeah, for instance, to export some of these file formats, you have to send it to the cloud, and then that's what they make you pay a subscription for. It's a little bit, I don't know, maybe if I was exporting and importing super, super complex files, that would make sense. Oh, well, I guess they got to make money somehow. All right. So here we have what's called a sketch, and it's just basically like a dimensionless drawing. It does have width and height, and there's supposedly a way to show these dimensions, but it doesn't work for me. I don't know why. Something promising is that it does look like it's exactly in this kind of 0x, 0y positioning, so that's pretty cool. Oh, I mean, you'll have to look up a tutorial if you want to know how to navigate around the canvas. I'm still kind of bad at it. Basically, I'm just right-clicking and rotating. If your mouse has more buttons than an Apple mouse does, it's probably useful. Okay, so we want to do a couple things. We want to extrude everything down to get the thickness of our block of wood. For me, well, these guitars are generally about 1 3/4 inch. So that's what I'll do. I click each of these bodies and hold shift while I'm doing that to get there. And then this little option comes up. I'm going to say minus 1.75 inches, please. And then our sketch disappeared as soon as I did that. But we need it so we can also click E again for extrude. For a Telecaster neck, this neck pocket depth is minus 16 millimeters. And so the nice thing is that that automatically extruded in there. And this doesn't necessarily have a specific necessary depth, but for me, I used 1.5 inches depth. So basically leaving a 1/4 inch to cover the back of it, but then plenty of space for all of the controls and wiring that you got to solder. And yeah, if you had pickup cavities here, you know, it would be easier to draw those in Illustrator and bring them in. And then you can do a cool thing called filleting. So, you know, this, by the way, is basically as far as I would want to go for a 3D route. Let's hide this. And yeah, you can also like do things like rendering and such, which is kind of cool. And, you know, how I made this here. Yeah, I was just going to show filleting, which you can get to with the F key, I believe. And yeah, and a lot of these things, by the way, are like, you know, under here. So they have nice icons and such that are somewhat helpful. Sometimes you have to Google things, of course. So fillet, you can select an edge and you can just type it in again. So for this one, I wanted to do a 1/8 inch. So that's 0.125 inches. And yeah, it just kind of does it. Sometimes it doesn't work as you'd expect, as well as you'd expect it to. So I didn't find a magical way to solve that some of the time. It sometimes was just very weird. You can see that, for instance, I'm having to enter this in a few times, but eventually it got there. Yeah, so to me, it's really incredible how much of a difference a little rounding has on like whether a thing looks like a guitar. It's pretty cool. This back actually neck pocket needs less. Wonder if I can like, does that work? Oh, apparently not. Doing badly at math here. I think this is a 1/16 of an inch. Oh, I guess it won't let me do it there either. Here's a good example of where, for some reason, it just doesn't want to work. Weird. Okay, well, that kind of worked. In reality, I did this filleting on my real guitar project with a router and a roundover bit. And that's kind of a good thing because, yeah, this back of the neck actually can't have this much rounding with the typical guitar, like a tele control cover, not control, neck plate. Yeah, if you had different systems of bolts, it probably could, which would be kind of nice, but I don't know. Yeah, the last thing I guess you'd probably want to do is move it so it's on top of the surface rather than below, because just to make it easy to extrude the body and then cut out holes, we did minus 1.75 inches, for instance. So click the M button and click here, and I wonder if we say 2 inches. Oh, okay. So I guess it wants us to say minus 1, darn it, 1.75 inches. Okay. Popping back in real quick just to say one more thing. How do you measure the object in Fusion 360? Obviously, you don't want to make something that is the wrong scale. So you can do that. You press, over in this sidebar, you go into bodies and you can right click the body 1 it's called here. You can go to properties, and then over here this pops up with a bunch of useful things like the center of mass. But this bounding box is the information that I was looking for. It gives the exact length, width, and height. So these correspond, let's see, 420.638. Well, I can't look at my Illustrator file, but I'm fairly sure that this corresponds exactly. So that's nice to know. Yeah, it's pretty handy because if you're coming in from the SVG route, it's a little harder. You've got to do some scaling, some math, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. It's much nicer just to be able to go straight in here with the DWG export from Illustrator. That is a reasonably promising guitar design. And I'm sure that Fusion 360 pros, if they're watching this, have given up minutes ago because they must be shaking their heads at how horribly I'm handling the software. But it is pretty fun once you get a little bit of comfort with it. And I would love to use it more at some point to design guitars or other tools or objects or, yeah, who knows what. Keyboard, PCBs. My sense is you can do like so much in Fusion 360. So this isn't an ad or anything, clearly. But yeah, it is to say someday I hope I have a 3D printer and router and stuff. That'd be super cool. But I would need space and money. For now, I'm going to export this for my archives. I may open source this project if you're watching and you're really interested in maybe making your own. And I haven't open sourced it, just reach out. Unless you're like a huge company, I'd be happy for you to use this for free. If you're a huge company, I'd want probably some licensing. I guess, you know, it's a shape I spend time and effort on, and I think it's a cool idea, and I really just like it. Like, in a hard to describe way, I think it's a beautiful result, like more so than expected. That's why, you know, initially this started as a joke, like, oh, what's halfway between a Les Paul and a Tilly? And then I saw where it was going, and I was like, oh, dang, I actually love that. So, yeah, I think there's some, you know, value here. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just a type designer and I make a shape and I like it. I'm like, this has value. But anyway, a little bit strange for my channel perhaps, but if no one else finds it useful, I might in the future. If you're making type, hope it's going great. If you're making guitars, I hope it's going great. Thanks a lot.